The National Desk, America's News Now.
Funding a new wall in Texas, we go behind Biden's decision to allow construction to begin.
The border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't. They wouldn't.
Then a troubling trend when it comes to fatalities of children over the past decade. Coming up, how it threatens our nation's future. And fired but not done. Two former coaches are hitting back at their previous employers. Just how many millions those schools could be forced to fork over. I'm Amira David. This is the National Desk. Controversy stretching across the border today as a campaign promise comes crashing down 24 hours after waiving laws that will allow a border wall to be built. The Biden administration is defending its decision with questions coming from all sides. Let's get right to the National Desk's Christine Frizzell, who's been tracking the developments.
A change of heart and of policy at the southern border. The White House restarting construction of a border wall because President Biden says the money allocated for it was set to expire, but also saying this.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No.
So the Biden administration has decided to waive 26 federal laws to carry out expeditious construction of new border barriers in Texas. Posting this notice to the Federal Registry, citing an acute and immediate need to prevent unlawful entries. It's a sharp pivot from what candidate Joe Biden said in 2020.
There will not be another foot of wall constructed on my administration.
Former President Trump immediately asking if Joe Biden would apologize to him and America for taking so long. The decision comes as tens of thousands of migrants have come to the United States in recent days, and top officials like Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken are in Mexico, meeting with officials there at a time of increasing pressure for the White House to do more. New York City Mayor Eric Adams himself traveling to Mexico City this week, telling migrants not to come.
We want to make sure that we have a great level of transparency of the challenges that we are facing.
His city overrun after more than a year of migrants being sent there. And this was the scene in Chicago.
We're not anti-migrants, but it shouldn't be on our backs.
Residents furious. A local community field house was turned into a migrant shelter without their consent.
We lose this. You know how far our kids have to go to do activities?
President Biden's decision on the border wall is being slammed by some environmentalists, but celebrated by many Democrats, concerned by recent polls showing their party being overwhelmingly blamed for the crisis. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzell.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas are in Mexico for 2 days of talks. While there, they will meet with Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador and his security secretary. The discussions are centered around the flow of illegal immigration and human and drug trafficking, among other foreign policy discussions. Secretary Blinken spoke today about the need to not fall behind.
I think one of the defining challenges that we're dealing with is it is unquestionable that we have made real progress. And yet the challenges we face are in many ways historic in nature. And we have to make sure that our progress not only keeps up with the challenges, but actually gets ahead of it.
It is day 2 of the healthcare workers' strike, and there has been very little movement on that front. Reuters reporting union and Kaiser Permanente officials hitting a bargaining snag with no further talks scheduled at this point. On Wednesday, 75,000 people walked off the job in 5 states and the nation's capital to begin a 3-day walkout in what has become the largest healthcare work stoppage scene in U.S. history. Meantime, in that ongoing UAW strike, now in its 20th day. We are expecting a big update from the union tomorrow afternoon. At 2 p.m., UAW head Shawn Fain will provide insight into negotiations with Detroit's big three automakers and announce whether there will be an expansion in workers walking off the job. 25,000 auto workers are picketing across the country right now. We know there has been some positive movement this week. Ford gave a new offer yesterday, one they said was their most robust offer yet. Stellantis has been quiet about their talks, but the union said last week they were progressing. General Motors, on the other hand, seems to have made the least progress toward a deal with the union. GM's latest move was to secure a $6 billion line of credit to assist their overhead throughout a prolonged strike. This just in, a former University of Southern California gynecologist charged with sexual misconduct found dead in his Los Angeles home yesterday. 76-year-old George Tyndall was accused of sexual abuse between 2009 and 2016 by hundreds of women. He was awaiting trial after pleading not guilty in 2019. His lawyer says there is no evidence of foul play or suicide. Morgan State University has canceled its homecoming football game this weekend as the search for the suspects from Tuesday's mass shooting continues. Take a look at this. You are looking right now at surveillance video of the persons of interest police say they believe are connected to the incident. Police shared these images today in hopes that someone can identify these individuals. The shooting, which injured 5, included 4 students and has left the university and greater Baltimore community trying to heal. No arrests have yet been made. Daycare owner Gray Mendez and 2 others charged in the deadly fentanyl overdose of a toddler back in court today. They face charges in the death of 1-year-old Nicholas Dominici. Prosecutors say Dominici and 3 other children were found unresponsive after being exposed to fentanyl that was stored and trafficked at the daycare. 3 children survived after being given the overdose reversal drug Narcan. Their appearance comes a day after Mendez's husband, Felix Herrera Garcia, faced a judge for the first time. Garcia, you may remember, was extradited to New York from Mexico last week after an 11-day manhunt led to his capture. Nancy Marks, the former treasurer for indicted Representative George Santos, pleaded guilty today to fraud conspiracy and said Santos gave his campaign a fake loan. Prosecution recommends she serve 3.5 to 4 years in prison. Congressman Santos has pleaded not guilty to 13 counts of money laundering and lying to Congress on financial disclosure forms. Well, a somber farewell today in San Francisco for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, who passed away last week. She was 90 years old. Politicians from around the country paid their respects to a trailblazer who held so many firsts as San Francisco's first female mayor, California's first female senator, as well as the longest-serving female senator in U.S. history. And while Senator Feinstein will be remembered for her remarkable career and more than 30 years on Capitol Hill, there is also now increased talk about the age and fitness of politicians in Washington. Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman takes a closer look.
In Washington, experience matters, and that wisdom often comes with age. But there is a renewed debate about how old is too old to govern. Though it's not just about a number, it is also about ability. Mental fitness is sometimes the larger consideration, especially in the current race for the White House.
We all age so differently. Some people are old when they're 45, and others are spry at 90. So it should always be a case-by-case basis. You can be a national treasure and still be too old for the job. If I'm on a plane and the pilot says, "This is your captain, Buzz Aldrin," I'm getting off.
President Biden's more frequent moments of perceived confusion have given political opponents fodder for attacks.
I mean, the guy can't find his way off of a stage. And this guy gets up. Where am I?
Concerns cross party lines, though.
And a string of
81-year-old Mitch McConnell has twice frozen in front of cameras in recent months for extended periods.
All right, I'm sorry, you all. We're going to need a minute.
Prompting many to say it's time for him to step down. though he has no plans to, nor does 83-year-old Democrat Nancy Pelosi, who just announced she is running again.
I am motivated to do everything I can to win this election. I think it's urgent for our democracy.
Last month, the New York Times documented 20 lawmakers over the age of 80, some retiring, but the Times points out most have given no indication they intend to leave. Also sticking around here for decades, the debate over term limits, and something one recent survey shows 5 in 6 Americans would like to see. On Capitol Hill, I'm Scott Thuman.
Scott, thank you. Coming up, hurricane season is still in full swing. We're going to bring you the latest forecast as Tropical Storm Philippe makes its way towards the U.S. And then the impact of an ongoing chemotherapy drug shortage on patients at cancer centers across the country. Plus, our water might be more polluted than previously thought. We're going to look into concerning new data about the nation's waterways. We'll be right back. Tropical Storm Philippe is making its way toward the U.S., and it is expected to bring lots of heavy rain and wind to the northeast this weekend. Philippe is currently in the Atlantic, packing a huge punch, 50-mile-an-hour winds. The storm center could reach eastern Maine by Saturday night. It's already bringing potentially life-threatening surf and rip currents to parts of the East Coast. Troubling numbers published today by the American Academy of Pediatrics. In a study from 2011 to 2021, the rate of fatal injuries to children under the age of 18 has increased. Most alarming to the Academy, the rate of gun-related deaths rose 87%. Drug-related deaths increased 133%, and overall injuries from self-harm, that rose 57%. Although over the past decade, the rate of children suffering non-fatal injuries during this time has declined. Former President Donald Trump took to his Truth Social platform today to say, quote, he will do whatever is necessary to help with the Speaker of the House selection process short term until the final selection of a great Republican speaker is made. And that could include going to the House Republican conference meetings on Tuesday as they decide who to nominate. Some members have floated the idea of nominating Donald Trump himself. Today, he repeated that he could be okay with being Speaker for the short term, but would rather be president again. Meanwhile, the congressman behind the removal of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House joined Jan Jeffcoat this morning on the National Desk and gave her an update on how he thinks things are going in the House and why he has optimism moving forward.
Well, I think there's really a lot of optimism and renewed hope that the House of Representatives is going to pass a budget, that we're going to move on to the process of having single subject spending bills, and that our oversight will become more robust with actual subpoenas and document demands to members of the Biden family and their bankers and their bookkeepers, so that we really get a sense of whether or not there was a deliverable that the Biden government was providing in exchange for all the money moving to the Biden family. I believe we have two excellent choices so far. Steve Scalise, who's our current number 2 from Louisiana, and Jim Jordan, who's my personal mentor, is someone I really look to as a personal hero, who's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Though either Jim Jordan or Steve Scalise would be a marked improvement over Kevin McCarthy, and their contest is underway now.
Congressman Matt Gaetz also said a vote for Speaker should be expected by next Wednesday. You can watch the rest of the interview there, along with all of the latest headlines from today at thenationaldesk.com. Well, auto regulators want 52 million airbag inflators recalled because they can emit metal fragments. A hearing today focused on whether NHTSA should uphold its finding that the inflators from ARC Automotive and Delphi Automotive pose an unreasonable safety risk. An ARC executive argued the injuries linked to the inflators were isolated. The recall would be one of the biggest in U.S. history. A widespread chemotherapy drug shortage still impacting several large cancer centers. New data from the National Comprehensive Cancer Network shows 86% of surveyed centers did not have at least one type of oncology medication. Most centers said they could still treat patients because of strict waste management and other procedures. Injected weight loss drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic could increase the risk of severe digestive problems like stomach paralysis and pancreatitis, according to a new study from the University of British Columbia researchers. The lead author saying that because tens of millions of people take the medications, even the low rate of impact could mean a high number of cases. Owners of electric vehicles from Kia, Hyundai, and the luxury brand Genesis will soon be able to easily use Tesla chargers in the U.S. Today, the automaker said they're going to be switching to Tesla's North American charging standard starting at the end of the year. Ford, General Motors, Nissan, Honda, and others have said they are planning on switching over as well. Ukrainian President Zelensky is again calling for more air defenses after at least 51 people were killed in a Russian strike that hit a grocery store and a cafe today. CNN reports that it seems to be the deadliest attack on Ukrainian civilians since early last year. Meanwhile, Russian President Putin said today that Russia has successfully tested a new nuclear-powered cruise missile. It comes as support for sending weapons to Ukraine seems to be dropping among Americans, both amongst Republicans and Democrats. A new Reuters Ipsos poll found only 41% of those surveyed thought the U.S. should provide weapons. That's down from 46% that was seen in May. A $130 million wrongful termination suit. Former Northwestern University football coach Pat Fitzgerald now suing for his firing that followed incidents of hazing and abuse alleged by football team members. Fitzgerald's attorney says there is no evidence to support he knew of the incidents at the time. Fitzgerald is seeking lost pay and additional money for infliction of quote, emotional distress and also punitive damages. Meantime, Michigan State University held a Title IX hearing concerning allegations that fired football coach Mel Tucker harassed sexual assault awareness speaker Brenda Tracy. Tucker missed today's hearing due to what he called a medical complication, but his attorneys offered new evidence to the school, allegedly showing texts of a consensual relationship between Tucker and Tracy. The former coach argues he should still be entitled to the $79 million still left on his contract. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America. We begin with mixed reaction to an annual gun buyback event in Columbus, Ohio.
It's just really election year propaganda, election year rhetoric, and it happens every election year. This was about optics. You lay out a bunch of firearms, long rifles and shotguns on a table, and you look at them and it looks like, oh, we just cleaned up the neighborhood.
Mayoral candidate Joe Motil and Brian Steele, vice president of the police union, are on the same page.
Here's the reality. The guns that were collected, those are not the guns, those are not the weapons that a violent offender's using.
But the city defends the event and its effectiveness. Mayor Ginther says less guns make everyone safer and more buybacks are being planned.
A Virginia woman says getting a cooking job hasn't been easy for her son David, who has Down syndrome.
The minimum wage has gone up, which is great, but it's been difficult for our kids that we love that are differently abled. So we just wanted him to have a supported working environment that he could thrive.
One day she got an idea to start a meal prep service with David as the cook. She asked a friend for help and started the business, naming it The Lucky Few. David and his friend Caroline are now both employed, helping make life easier for people in their community.
The first trip that we did together, that was so amazing. I had planned to go by myself, and like last minute, so I'm already there, and she's like, I think I'm gonna come. And then she comes, and we have like the most amazing time.
Reading natives Aaron Ramsey and Hope Leon are adventurous. The two are on a journey to break a Guinness World Record of 32 games in 1 year. Entering week 5 of this NFL season, Aaron and Hope have 7 games checked off. It's a tremendous amount of traveling, with one international trip sprinkled in.
Best of luck to them. Up next, shocking new information about pollution in our water and the potential health impact. Stay with us. New information about pollution in our water. You might be shocked to hear that hundreds of millions of pounds of toxic substances have leaked into our nation's waterways, and that's just data from one recent year alone. The contamination includes chemicals that can cause cancer and birth defects. In this Spotlight on America, Chris Daniels investigates the toxic threat and why some say more needs to be done to hold polluters accountable.
Industry looms over the city of Port Arthur, Texas, long the home of some of the nation's biggest chemical and oil facilities.
If it's about pipelines, importing and exporting, it's all in play right here in Port Arthur in Southeast Texas, in the belly of the beast.
John Beard worked in the petroleum industry for nearly 4 decades and now has become one of its biggest critics here on the Gulf Coast. He believes the chemical and energy plants lining this waterfront of the Neches River are leaking toxic substances into the water and soil that this community was built on. It's turned this river basin into one of the most polluted waterways in the country, endangering the lives of tens of thousands of people here.
I've had people tell me about times that the water looked like it had a foam on it like a head of beer. And then I've had water, my own water, that came out looking cloudy.
According to a new report that examined pollution in the nation's waterways, there were nearly 6,700 pounds of cancer-causing chemicals that were released into the lower Neches watershed in 2020 alone. But the problem of toxic dumping spills far beyond Texas.
Do you think most Americans even know what's going on?
No, they don't.
John Rumpler authored that national report, and he told us he discovered a wide range of factories and plants have been leaking into our waterways for years.
What we found looking at self-reported data is that they released nearly 200 million pounds of toxic chemicals to our rivers and other waterways. Some of those chemicals are linked to cancer, birth defects, developmental hazards for children.
His research put Texas at the top of the list for the most total toxic substances released, followed by Indiana, Virginia, Louisiana, and Alabama. Among the worst offenders, an Army ammunition plant, metal mining facilities, and electric utility companies. The report makes the case that the 50-year-old Clean Water Act, designed to protect our nation's waterways from precisely this kind of threat, has not delivered on its promise.
We've made progress, but there's far too much toxic pollution that companies are still dumping into America's waters.
Well, based on your data, it's not even close.
Correct.
Are the penalties strong enough?
I think that the Clean Water Act provides for very strong penalties. Whether state officials choose to go for those aggressive penalties or just give polluters a slap on the wrist is another story.
Port Arthur is a city of 55,000 people, where 75% are Black or Latino. It's long been known that communities of color often face the most exposure to pollution and the health effects that come with it. Here in Port Arthur, John Beard told us he believes there's already a cancer cluster forming.
Port Arthur is a sacrifice zone, and it has to end if we're going to make people healthier and safer and have a better environment for all.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
For the third time this week, the Actors Union and major Hollywood studios will be meeting tomorrow. This is a very positive sign towards a possible agreement. The union went on strike back in July. They say they're not getting fair compensation like pay bumps and royalty payments. The two sides are expected to work over the weekend and keep talking on Monday. Let's hope for a deal. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful night.